This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. For this is our final Belgian episode this year of the podcast. I shouldn't say final because who knows what the future may hold. We may find ourselves back in Belgium again sometime soon. But for this, the last of the 5 episodes we've recorded on this spring visit to Belgium, courtesy of our friends at Visit Flanders, we're finishing this off with a conversation here in Brussels, and I think it is really a glorified excuse just to come drink beers with Yvan de Baets and Eric Toft, Yvan of de la Senne and Eric of Schönramer, who also lives here in Brussels. And on this occasion, as a giant excuse to come here and drink some beers with two of the smartest people in brewing here, we are going to talk about European hops. Welcome back to the podcast, Yvan.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again.
It's nice to be able to record in person versus remote like we did last time.
Yes.
And welcome again back to the podcast, Eric.
Thank you.
Last time we did this, we were in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And
that's correct.
Here we are in Brussels, Belgium now, having a conversation again. Both are absolute masters at using hops. And while we oftentimes talk about using American hops within the podcast, since obviously American hops drive so many American beer styles that we talk about, from hazy IPA to West Coast IPA, and really all American IPA. We don't talk as much or spend as much time talking about European hops, the subtlety, fineness, but also building character, working with European growers, finding ways to evaluate those hops, understanding in that kind of context what, from that rub makes it through into finished beer, how both expressive yeasts, that Yvan uses, as well as lager yeasts, more conservative yeasts that Eric uses, work within those contexts and how through those various fermentation processes, these various hop characters express. We're going to try to cover that whole breadth of European hop topics on this episode. But first, at G&D Chillers, they always strive to build great chillers. Partner with them as you build great beer. But don't just take it from me.
Hey, this is Josh Erickson of Jafuncta Brewing in Mandeville, Louisiana. The team at G&D were a critical part of our 10X expansion, always just a phone call or email away. And thanks to their superior equipment, technology, and documentation, commissioning our new chiller was smooth and straightforward. Now we can't wait until we need to upgrade our existing chiller.
Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring on your new G&D chiller. And ProBrew is the industry partner that brewers trust to take their operations to the next level, especially when it comes to canning their product for distribution. By partnering with ProBrew, brewers can fill and seam their canned product of ranges from 100 to 600 cans per minute. Their unique filling process also ensures low dissolved oxygen pickup and focuses on product quality during the entire process. For more information, visit probrew.com or email them at contactus@probrew.com. ProBrew, brew your beer. Also, Old Orchard has supplied flavored craft juice concentrate blends to over 46 states for the production of fruit-forward beer, cider, seltzer, wine, spirits, and more. By partnering with some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape, Old Orchard has become a go-to source of fruit-forward ingredients. To learn more and request your free samples, head on over to oldorchard.com/brewer. We normally start off the podcast with background, but I think if anyone really wants to hear the de la Senne story or the Schönramer story, they should go back and listen to the full episodes that we've done with both of you, and I think they can, really everyone should have already done that already. I'm just going to assume that they have if they want that background. But it has been a few years since we've talked to Yvan, and almost 2 years now since we've talked to Eric. So maybe we just start with a quick catch-up. What's the last year looked for like for you, Yvan?
Well, shrinking.
Shrinking.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah, like for everyone in Belgium, I think in Germany, in UK, in the US, everybody knows. Everybody who is in the industry knows that we are not living great times. Lots of crises, one after the other, inflation, societies in which people drink less than before. We have to add to that very bad weather last year in Belgium. This year doesn't look way better so far. So yeah, it's shrinking. We are
The weather impacts you because so many people drink outside on terraces.
Yeah, and in parks and stuff. You can drink outside, even in streets in my beloved country. So that's something people have to know. No, it's I would lie if I would be saying, yeah, everything is fine, it's good. No, it's not. It's not terrible either. I think that we are doing really okay compared to some others for
Right.
sure. So I will stop complaining because that would not be fully right.
Sure. Eric, how's your year been?
Well, in Schönramer, things were pretty much stable last year. We had a flat year growth-wise, which is fine. I think it's necessary. You don't have to keep growing. We're having the same problems, of course, that Yvan addressed. Energy costs, be it are you heating with natural gas or with oil? We have the ingredients, raw materials. We have our contracts, but even with that, forward contracting, malt prices, barley prices have gone up, have doubled. But it's just more the inflation throughout society that's keeping people are keeping their money closer to their body at the moment. So
And it's hard to pass some of that on in terms of your increased costs to an end consumer that expects beer
exactly.
to
Yeah,
cost
we're
something.
already sort of high end by German standards. I mean, for pretty much any other country in Europe, our beer is actually pretty cheap or reasonably priced. But the Bavarians especially are used to low beer prices, and it's very hard to pass the costs or the additional costs on to the consumer. At least we do it, but gradually with a delay. So, it's been a year where we haven't done much investing in the plant, but luckily we're in a good condition right now and have done a lot in the past. So we can sit back and enjoy our brewery as we have it now, and wait a little bit with investment.
Sure. Have you noticed any changes or shifts, Yvan, in the way that, not just the way that people drink, because obviously that occasion is changing a bit, and I should say, coming through Brussels and through the various other cities that we've visited over this past week here in Belgium, we're very jealous of the amount of people that are still out. That it is less for you, and it is still immensely more people out and about, sitting on cafes and terraces and drinking beer and being social. It seems as if in the United States in particular, things have gotten much less externally focused and much more home focused over the last several years. And you just don't see nearly as many people sitting out having fun, drinking with each other. And so, but I mean, yes, even 10% less of those people can still seem like a lot here, even if it's a significant decline. But have you noticed a difference in the way and the styles that people are gravitating to, or some of those beers that they like to drink now?
Yeah, the phenomenon you described is also true for Belgium. People buy a little bit more from the retail to drink home with their friends. I think, I'm not an expert of that region, but I think more in Wallonia, probably in the south of the country. In Brussels and Flanders, I guess that people still go more often to the bars and the cafes. But those are so important in our culture. I cannot imagine my country without the culture of cafes. That's really where the people go. They gather. It's in our DNA, and hopefully it's strongly in our DNA. So it's still going on, for sure.
It's such a beautiful culture and such a great way to be social and drink together and enjoy alcohol in a social context, the way that it should be used and is meant to be used. Have the beers that people drink and consume, changed at all or shifted at all, even, in any particular way for you, Eric?
Interestingly enough, our flagship has always been the Helles, or at least since 1955, I would say. And that is now the beer style that people want in Germany. It's always been the beer for Bavaria, but you see Bavarian brewers from the north, or even bigger breweries from the north of Germany, starting to brew Helles, which was something that they maybe even 5 years ago would have laughed at the prospect of doing that. It was Pils. There was for a while a Weissbier trend in the north of Germany. For a time, that was kind of the beer that everybody wanted, but right now it's Helles. So you see also established breweries that have a brand of Helles rebranding it. The way they rebrand it is to put it into a retro packaging, preferably a blue crate with Euro bottle format instead of the more modern NAV bottle, putting on retro labels, using old-looking paper, and if possible, they try to tack the name Z on the end of it to indicate the close proximity of a lake or alpine setting. So they're all trying to capitalize on the success of Augustina or Tegernsee, just in their branding, and what's in the bottle is, of course, a different story. So.
Interesting. The rise of, in America, it's the retro light lager, and it's a similar trend of even craft breweries now making either resurrecting and licensing old brands or creating old sounding brands, or something along those lines to try to connect, because there almost seems like a hipster backlash to craft beer where they want cheaper old things rather than the more expensive cool craft beer. And what a funny dynamic. Interesting to see that it's worldwide, or at least it's Germany and the United States, and not just here. Anyway, let's shift gears. Let's talk about the current state of European hops, some of the challenges that you all have faced, in that kind of environmental realm. I think every brewer everywhere that has had to source hops out of Europe for various beers that they make has experienced challenges this year. Some countries a little more than others, but it's definitely been a challenging year, and you both have had to solve lots of problems around that. Before we do it, experience distinct transparency and juiciness with Omega Yeast's Daybreak 5. Using their Lumina technology, Omega genetically eliminated haze in the popular British 5 strain, allowing you to preserve the fruit-boosting prowess while achieving crystal clarity. Perfect for modern West Coast IPAs. Learn more at info@omegayeast.com. Also, RSS Macklin, a family-owned company started by the head of seaming technology from PS Angeles and SME and field service technician for Ball Corp, offers audits and repairs for can seamers and can integrity training. With experience from big breweries, they bring valuable knowledge to craft businesses. They provide solutions for can damage, seam training, and they'll help your facility become self-sufficient without relying on OEMs. If you have any questions regarding your machine setup, parameters, or concerns about your can line, call them at 330-299-8210 or email them at service@rssmacklin. That's RSSMACLIN.com. Also, Indie Hops breeds new hop varieties to help brewers captivate beer lovers. Brewers worldwide trust Indie's unique varieties, Strata, Lorien, Luminosa, Meridian, and Audacia, to modernize, brighten, and diversify their beer lineup. Indie also offers classics that thrive in Oregon terroirs, such as Chinook, Crystal, and Sterling, thoughtfully crafted and selected hops to meet your brewing needs. Visit indiehops.com/podcast to discover what's new in hop flavors. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. Well, Eric, why don't you kick this one off? Let's talk about your experience in both. Obviously, you forward contract for your hops. You've got deep relationships with the grower of your hops, and you've also witnessed some pretty challenging environment for hops growing this year that's had some significant impacts, as everyone has. Obviously, I think we all know the Czech Republic just had a really, really challenging year with very low oil content for all of Czech Saaz. The climate change and the way that that's impacting growers is just tragic and catastrophic, for a significant amount of Europe. It was a really bad year, and that's impacting the way that things go. Talk to me a little bit about your experience with sourcing hops over the last year and some of the strategies that you've had to take on to evaluate, understand what you're getting, and then think about how that you work those into beers.
Well, the harvest 23 was fortunately an okay harvest. So we took all of our contracted hops and even bought some spot hops from the same yard.
Where they're coming from? Tettnang?
Tettnang and Hallertau, yeah. And 2022, we declined most of our hops that we had contracted, but we were able to add that on to the end of our existing contracts. So 2022 was a horrible year, and it
declined them.
Well, what's the English term to say? What did we do? We said if we will take them if they need us to take them, but if they need our hops to fulfill other contracts, then they can do that, and that's what they did. So. And it was good for us because alphas were very low, oils were very low. I had enough in stock. I tried to keep enough through the forward contracting. I've built up about 18 months worth of stock of hops. So by harvest time or by the end of harvest, I always have about 18 months on hand.
On hand at the brewery.
Yeah,
in cold storage.
Yeah, just to be safe. Just in case we have a bad harvest. So if need be, I can not take some of the contracted hops, or if the content of those hops are so low, I can compensate it with what I have in stock and blend properly.
That's an insane strategy for most brewers to think about holding that much hop stock just to hedge against that kind of change.
Yeah, well, it's been, it used to be that 1 year in 7 was a bad harvest or a poor harvest or a not so good harvest. And now, I mean, in 5 years, we've had 3 bad harvests. So it's really hard to feel safe just living from year to year. So if by the end of the brewing season or coming, by the time the hop harvest comes around, if I'm already in want or in need of hops, it can be a kind of a desperate feeling. And then, of course, you're at the mercy of whatever you get. And I prefer to live a little more comfortably and to know that I have enough on hand that if I do, I took from the 22 harvest, for example, some Hersbrucke with 1.5% alpha.
Oof.
And I blended that. I just finished blending that now. So I blended that in with Hersbrucke from 2021 and from the 2023 harvest when I got it. So I was able to bridge the gap with 3, in a total of 3 harvests, or 1 harvest on each end of that really bad harvest. So yeah, it's for many years the brewery was growing at an incredible rate. We were growing 10 to 15% a year, and I was always short on hops. And
so you got used to disciplined about buying ahead,
right?
In order to stay ahead.
Now we're in a much more comfortable situation where we have a very, very small growth. It's a tiny plus every year for the last couple of years since COVID, basically. And that's a much more comfortable situation to be in. So I finally have a little bit of stock that I can sit on and blend accordingly.
That's an expensive thing to pay for, to be that far ahead and, making a financial argument to do that. Right. Has to be, that's a pretty tough business decision.
Well, our customers, we brew sell about 120,000 hectoliters, just a little less than 120,000 hectoliters a year. 80% of that is Helles, and our market is very local. 92% of that is sold in a 60 kilometer radius around the brewery. So our customers are very loyal, but they also have very high expectations. They want it to be a natural product, but they also want absolute consistency, reliable consistency. And the only way you can do that is to blend harvest years, or to have that capacity to blend not only different harvests, but the different varieties. And
So that kind of blending or homogenization of these multiple years is that strategy that keeps that kind of consistency. And if you need to sneak some low alpha, tougher stuff in there, you can do it and make that change. If you have to do anything, you can make it gradual.
Right.
Sure.
Right. Exactly.
How Yvan, how have the last 2 years looked for you in terms of finding the hops that you need for the beers that you make?
Well, of course, we are experiencing the same problems that Eric has and everybody, I guess. But we could somehow overcome it because we work, as Eric also, but in very close relationship with our hop suppliers, and we are very lucky to work with wonderful hop growers who are like the best winemakers. Even in a bad year, they can make a very good crop of hops, of quality hops, and we build that relationship since years and years now, and we are lucky enough to have the first hand on the hops. I do the hop harvest with them each year. I'm on the fields with them. I do the selection right after drying, and so doing that and trusting those people, I can still have access to really, really great hops. We don't have the financial means and the right size for doing what Eric does, like having more than a year in advance of hops, but we try to always have like a long enough overlap between two harvests to see what the new quality is like, and to still be able to do some blendings with the previous harvest if necessary. So we do that, but on a smaller scale, of course, than Eric can.
Let's talk about that. How do you? I know last time we talked, Eric, you talk about spacing in, and then in January we're doing some single batches to test some things like that. Was in the case of malt, but you stage out some of your tests in order to understand how these things may ultimately fit into those blends. As you think about hops and you start rubbing the new season hops, what does that process then look like for both of you in analyzing those hops and understanding how that fits into the expectation of flavor and aroma that you have? What's your process of evaluating those like?
Well, it's important to get out in the hop yards before harvest even begins, just to get a feel for what's coming. And actually, by the middle of July, it's becoming pretty clear. If it's been too dry, you start to get a bit nervous. But to get out there, so early August, middle of August, and talk to the farmers, get a feel for what the hops look like, what the potential yield is going to be. Yield not so much in terms of kilogram per hectare or whatever, but or tons per hectare or centimètre per hectare, whatever the term you use, but more just what the alpha and what the lupulin is going to look like, really. And then follow up as the just before harvest gets started. Again, getting out into the hop yards, and then during harvest, and sometimes even with the farmer, discussing the different yards of perhaps 5 different yards of one variety, maybe Hersbruck or Select, and talking with the farmer what my opinion is, which yard I would take first, which one I think I will probably want to take home with me then, or once the harvest is over. So sort of pre-selecting already just before and during harvest, and then post-selecting, as Yvan said, then right off the dryer or shortly thereafter, after it's been killed. So it's a lot of time spent on site with the farms.
It is a lot of time on site.
And as Yvan said, it's extremely important to have these good relationships, and then with that, you can then be more flexible with your farmer, or they're more flexible with you. And you say, okay, this year I'll just take a little bit, or take a little bit more. And sometimes they're grateful if they can, if you can, if they can fulfill other contracts, and not have to worry about fulfilling yours. And then the year after, if it's a better harvest, you might get a little bit extra at the old price.
Sure. As you're walking through those fields, what is, are there things you look for, positive traits in some of the noble hop varieties that you select, or are there negative traits that you identify that you're trying, specifically to steer away from?
Well,
or is this just a broadly hedonic, I think this one is better than that one?
Well, obviously there's the obvious hop diseases and hop pests that you want to avoid, or that at the same time are unavoidable. A certain amount of stress from fungus or from fleas or from mites or from spiders can be almost a little bit beneficial to developing the character of the hop. So I'm not too worried about the appearance. I mean, the appearance, of course, is important. I mean, you don't want it to have wilt throughout the yard. But slight stress has always been good in developing alpha or oils, at least to an extent. What you don't want is sunburn or hail damage, but of course, that's very obvious. And hail damage is something that usually comes about this time of year, and not later in the year. But it's I think it was Dave Grinnell from Boston Brewing Company said selecting hops is not a beauty competition, and it's true. I mean, it's nice if it looks nice, but the most important is how does it smell, and I think this will come across well in my beer.
And what are there any of those markers in terms of aroma that that you are specifically looking for or specifically not looking for?
Well, so a lot of that you have depending upon the variety, what particular characteristic you're looking for, be it sort of a citrus touch or a floral or an herbal touch. Tetnung, there are two kinds of tetnung. There's one that's a little more herbal and one that's a little more citrus, almost lemony. I kind of prefer that direction. The same with Hallertau Mittelfrüh. You have some that are more citrusy and some more floral, and I like the balance between those two. A lot of what happens with the aroma depends also on how it's treated at the farm, what their setup is, how their equipment works. You can have a wonderful hop coming out of the hop yard, even out of the pluck machine, and it can be destroyed when it comes out of the kiln. Be it the air that they kiln it too warm, or they take conditioning air post kiln to kind of homogenize the moisture content of the hop. If you get, and this used to be a big problem, it's not so much anymore, but you'd have these little tiny farms that had a mixed farm. They'd have cows and pigs and horses and the manure piles, and they'd be drawing this fresh air from outside across the manure piles into the conditioning box, and you'd get hops smelling of pig shit or cow shit or even horse, and you don't run into that too much anymore. So a lot of it's
the European food safety folks have said, maybe you should separate these things.
Yeah, those. When I started in Germany, I think the average farm size was 4 hectares, and there were I don't know how many thousands of farmers, and now there's just a little over 1,000 farmers, and the average farm size is around 25 hectares per farm. So they're more focused on just hop growing, and they're not so much more mixed farms.
Sure. Yvan, what's your process look like in terms of building that relationship with your hop farmers and then evaluating as harvest time comes near?
Well, the relationship was built in visiting them, spending time with them, eating with them, talking about life, politics, values, and then we saw that we are sharing so many things, actually, even if they are from different cultures. I buy my hops in Germany and Slovenia, only those two countries. It's really something that came with the time. Now for choosing them, it's really intuitive. It's hedonic, as you mentioned, and I use a lot of my intuition, and I'm probably sometimes wrong. Also, you have to accept that. Because you will choose certain batches, and you are sure that it will fit your beer perfectly. But you can also say in theory that if you choose another batch, it would do something even better. So honestly, it's not an exact science. It's just like being intensely there with all your senses and your intuition, and hope that you make the right choices. Something that I mentioned is that we always do blind sniffing, so we really don't know what we will get and where the hops are coming from, etc. And I tend to always choose hops coming from the same field, actually, which is nice to hear in terms of constancy for yourself at first, but no, it's really your presence when you are there, smelling, and then you hope that something magic will happen, I guess. But being on the field and feeling all those things is really key for sure. But then, as Eric said, you totally rely on the skills of the grower. And this is why it's super important to talk all the time about techniques with them to understand how good they are, and you learn a lot also when talking with them. I don't have the chance to be able to be on the fields from July. I'm only there in September, but from July I give a call to my farmers every week, just to see how things are going, what are the trends, if they have a stress, etc., etc. And so I have that. I'm almost there already. They send me videos very, very often, and I really know what happens on the field, even at a distance.
You're very high maintenance.
That's right.
They deal with pests on the field, and also the pestering from Yvan over email.
No, actually, they appreciate that.
Oh, you do. They do.
The people we work with, they love the contact with the brewers, because they understand way better our request, what we are waiting from them, from the hops. They do love that. It's never bothering them. Never.
Sure. They farmers have said to me that they feel that the contact with brewers like us makes them better farmers, just like I think it makes us better brewers.
Exactly.
Having contact with the farms.
Totally. Yeah.
How was your experience selecting hops? Does that match Yvan's, where
it does,
you're finding the same field blind year after year?
Always ending up in the same fields. Yeah. It's strange.
And I've heard the same thing from a lot of brewers. Our friend Vinny has said the same thing. They end up blindly selecting from the same exact field, of course, at the same farm year after year. Neil Fisher, Weldworks, has mentioned, like, it's the same field from the same farm. They all select blind, but when you find that thing, there's actually more consistency, to the, whether it's the terroir or whatever that is about, that certain field and where it's coming from, that comes through more often than not. But what I'm curious about, as you're talking and evaluating hop producers, what questions, how you determine, how the quality of their farming practice, and making the questions you ask for brewers that may not be as experienced in understanding some of these. I'm just curious how you go in and dive in when you're meeting growers on a farm, and the kinds of questions you asked. So maybe we can dig in that for a second. But first, Berkeley Yeast, founded by bioengineers. It's yeast that's designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency, increase efficiency, and save you money. If you've been following yeast, I'm sure you've heard about their strains. Super Bloom strains make classic hops flavor. Fresh strains keep diacetyl low, even with large hop additions. Tropic strains make a tropical bouquet reminiscent of the finest Southern Hemisphere hops. And they just dropped new strains that are even more futuristic. Nationwide free shipping in the USA. Mention this podcast for 20% off your first order. And if you're a brewer who's also interested in distilling, subscribe now to the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast, available on all your favorite podcast platforms, hosted by Sydney Jones and Molly Troop. This podcast explores the technical and creative processes behind great spirits through conversations with some of the leading distillers working today. It's everything you love about the Craft Beer and Brewing podcast, but focused on distilling. Click on the link in the show notes and give it a listen. For a brewer that's trying to strike up a relationship with a hop grower and they're not exactly sure where to start, where would you start? Eric, what kind of, when you say you want to evaluate, the practices and understand their approach to growing, what do you think are some of those keys that you would focus in on and how they do things?
First thing, I'd get drunk with him.
Good point.
That's and if he's a nice guy when he's drunk, then that's already good basis right there. And
highly technical, highly quantifiable. Yeah, exactly what I would expect from you.
It is quantifiable. I have numbers.
Yeah. So that's it's very important to see if you can get along with a guy personally and on a very personal level. So if you get drunk with somebody, you talk about everything and not just about farming practices. And so that's first thing, if you just kind of stiffen each other out to see if you can be drinking buddies. And
if we're going to vibe.
And because if you spend time at the farm, it's a pretty, even if it's a dry harvest, it's a pretty wet time. There's an awful lot of beer involved. And so if he can hold his beer and still function, that's already the first step. But a lot of it is if you visit the farm, I mean, just, have a look at all the equipment. Cleanliness, of course, is extremely important. And a lot of it's intuitive. If you haven't, been to many hop farms, you see things you think that doesn't look right, or, how, that seems a bit dirty, or that, oh, wow, that's clean. That's, so a lot of just, just the general hygiene of the farm. Those are the first really big starting points there. I mean, if you really get into detail later, the square meters of their kiln as opposed to the load that they put on it. Is it what kind of a kiln is it? Have they been using that for long, or have they just installed that new technology? You have the, I don't even know the English term, but the bandtrockner. So it's a continuous feed that goes, it's a conveyor feed. And then you have the kiphorn. Jesus, my English is failing me completely. So you have just the floors and the three tiers where you load the top floor and then you dump it to the middle floor and to the final floor and then take it out. And then the conditioning box. Is there the big pile of shit next to the building right outside the conditioning box? These are things that you don't want to have. So. But it all starts at a very personal level. If you can get drunk with somebody and have a good time, that's a good starting point.
Are there things that you look for in hop growers, Yvan?
Yeah, definitely. I always like to know what's the size of the layer, the depth, of the layer.
Right, the depth
on the kiln. I don't like to depth of a layer. The temperatures during kilning are very important, of course. Also the day of harvest. A lot of hop growers, they can tend to wait as long as they can because it's a stupid system. They are still paid on the alpha content of the hops, and so the natural tendency for them is to wait until the last moment, so they have more alphas, they have more money. But this is not giving the best hops. For some varieties, it's probably okay, but not for all of them. And so time to time, I ask for an early crop for certain varieties because I know they will be better. But that relates to the relationship you have with them also. I never tried to negotiate the price of my hops. I have with all my growers an agreement that I always pay a fair price for them, so they know what they will get. They know that they can do some investments that are good for them, but good for us also because it's good for the quality. So let's say that in the good years, I will always pay a little bit too much. And in the bad years, I pay a little less than what I should pay. And so it's very constant, it's very predictable, and everybody is happy. And so if I ask, for instance, an early crop for some variety, it will not change the price that I will pay to the grower. So everybody feels comfortable. That is extremely important. And also, the last year, sadly, because of the climate change, we have to talk more and more about irrigation or not. The way they irrigate, there are different ways. Some growers have always like some water dripping on the plants. This I personally don't really like because it doesn't seem very natural to me. Some others, they will irrigate like step by step, like if a rainfall, it's not raining like every day during the whole month. I mean, you have a certain amount of water that the plant can take, and then the plant will know certain period more dry, but it makes the plant more solid. I personally prefer that way. So all these discussions are very, very important.
And it's not just a simple question of how modern does the farm look, because there are very ways you can sometimes the most modern farms are also trying to be the most efficient on their end, and maybe not making some of the concessions that you're totally looking for.
Yeah,
what Yvan mentioned, because many contracts are still alpha based, and that's why we pay just a kilo price, kilo raw hops. That's it. If it's 1% or 10% alpha, that's not the issue, because it's your yield per hectare in kilos. You take your total costs and divide that by the kilos, and that'll give you then what the farmer needs to earn,
right? At
least to cover his costs.
That's more common in the United States too, the way by weight rather than by alpha acid.
By alpha, yeah. And I mean, you can get into very, very into great depths with the farms and their techniques and that, and talking about picking windows and picking times, as Yvan mentioned. I mean, I prefer to have a hop I don't want it to be too late, because he starts to get that onion and garlic. You might have the highest alpha
acid, but
I want the finer aroma in that. And the farmers, if they know that, they appreciate that, and they will think of you if you're not there on that day when they're harvesting. Unfortunately, farmers plant different varieties to try to use the entire harvest season, so that they have picking windows for each variety. There are the early varieties, the middle varieties, and the late varieties. And they want to have a good mix of varieties so that they can fill that whole season as best as possible. And there is a tendency, or there can be a tendency, especially for very late varieties, then that might maybe not even be quite ripe and ready, but it's only 2 more hectares and they just want to be done. And all the Polish guys or the Romanians, the harvest helpers, want to go home. And so there's kind of a tendency to pick the later varieties sometimes a little bit too early. If you want those hops, and if you wait long enough, it can be very rewarding, and it's even better to shut everything down. And I've had my farmers do that for me, for example, for Mandarina, for that variety, just because it takes a certain amount of time, and from really one day to the next, you have that exact character that you want.
One day.
Yeah.
How do you let's also start talking about the process of using some of these hops. So now you've got you've gone through the harvest, you've checked your samples coming off of the kiln, out of drying. You know what you want to take, and after a few months, when they start shipping them to you, you add them. Of course, Eric, you're adding them into this giant warehouse full of 18 months of hops that you already have, and you have no need to even think about them for at least another 6 months or something. But that gives you a whole bunch of leeway in order to to experiment, to sample, to even test, or include them in small ways and various things before they need to be worked into a broader blend. And I'm sure Yvan, who actually has more immediate economic concerns and can't keep that has to start thinking about flipping over and using those. But what do both of your processes look like then in taking these new hops, looking at the analytical component of them, how that figures into the recipes and the standards that you already have developed, and then test how that aroma and flavor may in process and reality come through before they potentially go prime time into big batches where the stakes are high.
Yeah, for me, the problem we have is that all our batches are unique. We don't have any way to blend different batches, so it's difficult to afford to make like real experiments, changing totally the hops, taking only the new crop and then hoping it will be okay. So I use more my sense of smell. So it's very important when the new hops are entering the brewery to smell them also, because you could smell them at the farm. They were still in cones a few days after having been killed, and you have an impression from that. But then we are using pellets, Eric and I, and they will undergo another process, which is pelletization, and so it's important to open a bag and put your nose in it, and then start thinking and feeling and see, okay, maybe I should mix a little bit of those ones with the previous crop, maybe a bit more, a bit less. We, as Eric mentioned, also we are also mixing varieties to have more chances to have a better constancy and also to add complexity to our beers. But my way is mainly to smell and try to be the beer, if I may say, and then hope it will work. But okay, we are even if we talk about a crop that is not as good as the previous one, because we work with those fantastic growers, we know that we will have good hops anyway. So it will never be a drama. I mean, but of course we always try to find back the same flavor in our beer. So we are really talking about nuances here. There is no real catastrophe that is possible.
Sure. Eric, what's your test process look like?
Yeah, so it's after selection, very important, early selection, and get those hops to the processing plant, the pelletization plant where it's in the cooling, and we pay extra to get pelletized immediately. I mean, usually our hops are done with pelletization by the end of October. And so get them.
Why?
Just because I want it in the brewery. I want it to go from the farm to the cold room. Our farmer in Tettnang has his own cold room, so he puts his bales into the cooler there. And the pelletizing plant is 2 kilometers down the road from him, so he only delivers the hops just before pelletizing, and then when they're done, he brings them back and puts them into his cooling. So just to try to keep the cold chain upheld as best as possible.
Obviously, if the faster they're then pelletized, the faster they're into nitrogen flushed, non-oxygen environments.
Right. They're packed in these. They're called RB60s. They're rectangular bales of 60 kilograms. Well, not really 60 kilograms max. It's usually around 50, and they're packed into these bales and. So there's air in there. The temperature of the cooler at the pelletizing plant isn't 0 degrees. It's 10, 12 degrees
right.
C. So we want to just get that, just processed. And of course, the quicker you get it processed, the less degradation you have, the less oxidation, and the sooner you can have it, like you say, rinsed in nitrogen and packed into bags, and then put in the cooler in your brewery.
But so it means that you don't believe in the potential positive ripening of hops? Because I've heard that, and I honestly I don't know exactly what to think about that. Some people say, oh, it's sometimes good, and maybe it's totally varietal dependent. It's good to wait a little bit in bales because they will get finer flavors before being pelletized. Well, what is your take on that?
I've heard about that as well, but I've never been able to really judge or hops based on that. Except for smelling hops coming from bales that have been around for a long time. And of course, those are all a bit cheesy and oxidized.
Of course.
But I think that, the 4 to 6 weeks before pelletizing is already enough ripening time for me before it gets pelletized.
Totally makes sense.
And then when we get into the brewery, as Yvan says, open the bags of a few bags of each variety, have a sniff. Use those then immediately, just blend them into the next few brews. But then we do one-offs. I'll do the Helles with, one brew of Helles with 100% of this variety, put it into a small lagering tank, 100% of this one, to put it in a small lagering tank, and just see how it comes across, just by itself in the beer. And then, of course, because that's 80% of what we make, we can easily blend that back into the whole process.
So it's never a beer you have to release on its own. You can always
we'll fill up some extra kegs and drink those ourselves. Yeah.
Sure. I knew there was going to be some cool, weird process that you use around that, and that makes sense. Your single hop Helles.
Yeah.
Fun experiment to make there. I mean, how much does it truly change in any given year? Is the variance so significant that, and then how do you then go through and evaluate, those single hop batches and say, this is what we need to do. Let's move this and maybe use a little more of this. I mean, how does that process? How do you rebalance then?
Well, as Yvan mentioned, we know where our hops are coming from. They're usually from the same. I mean, certainly in some cases from the same farm. And if you select through a broker, they may be from the same farm every year. So. We know that we're getting good hops and people that they're good farmers. So that's already the first step. And we know that we're getting the best possible hops we can from that year, even if it's been a horrible harvest year. It's a lot of subtlety in aroma and in flavor that we hope the lay person will not notice, and usually. Obviously, they don't. With the blending that we do, it's maybe we're focusing on this too much. That's also possible.
That's kind of my question there. Like, if because it's possible to collect data and create an immense amount of data, but if you don't act on that data, then is it just extra work?
No, it's we don't make really that much extra work out of it. I mean, the data is all. At the end of the day, gut feeling. It's just how we perceive things to be when we select, how we perceive it when we get into the brewery, and how we perceive it in the beer, and then how we decide to blend it. But I mean, I guess I might be a little bit obsessive. As a brewer, I'm never quite happy, and it could always be a bit better. So it's certainly a lot of attention to detail, but I think it's necessary, because if you just say it doesn't matter. I mean, if it's almost being disrespectful of your public, of your consumers, and of your customers to just say,
and of yourself
and of yourself, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's part of a general attitude that we brewers should have, is to pay attention to every single detail, because even doing that, sometimes our beers are far from being perfect. I'm talking for myself, not for Eric's.
No, same for me.
And if you start giving away some of those things that can be considered as details, then you totally lose your tracks, because what will be the next step? Not taking care about your malt analysis, about your cleaning procedures. It's a general attitude that we have to have. It's also a lot of fun, and that's very important. It's the nicest part of our job, I think. It's to take care of our hops. There are lots of things that are way less funny than that, and that can be boring. No, I think it's very important, and it's very important for the people to understand that it's not because you buy a bag of, let's say, Sats or Cascade to name some, that you know that what you will get. It's incredible the importance of the terroir for hops, of the climate, of course, of the skills of the grower, and all those things are not interchangeable. If this is right to say in English, it will become part of the personality of your beer. And of your vision, and I think that having a vision for yourself, it means my beer should taste like that, and it will be hard, I know, but I will try for it to taste like that. This is key, and doing that, you stand apart, and it's important in a market that is overcrowded to stand apart those days, I think.
I agree 100%, and it's that's it. Never be happy, never be satisfied, and it's a philosophy that you can embody and you can sell to people. I mean, people believe it because you actually live that philosophy, and I think it also helps. It helps people understand your beer better, and it certainly helps people appreciate your beer more.
Folks are rolling here into the De La Senne tap room, and it's nice to see a good crowd coming in here. And we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but I want to follow up on that terroir question. You mentioned that terroir is very impactful. You all have very intentionally chosen hop growers in certain places that can create, grow hops at a high quality, obviously within that farm, and take care through that kilning process and then through that pelletizing process to make sure that everything is going to come through the way you want it. But you've also chosen those growing areas specifically because their hops provide that flavor and aroma that you're seeking out. Let's talk to me a little bit, Yvan, about that kind of variance in terroir, especially amongst typical common, German noble hops or Slovenian hops, like, hops people expect, and what that range looks like to you, and how you go about seeking out the character in some of these hops that certain farms in certain places can provide and others may not be able to offer.
Well, I'm not an expert in the terroir. I mean, composition of the soil.
Sure.
To say, I'm sure Eric is, but I'm not. But
I think terroir, we have to look at beyond just the soil, but it's also
microclimates.
Rain,
it's a geography also. What especially now again with the global warming, I think that areas like southern Germany, Tettnang, is very interesting because you have a huge lake there, the Lake Constance. Switzerland is on the other side of the lake. You have some mountains there also. I think it offers a sort of a protection against like dramatic changes in the climate, and the same goes for Slovenia. It's a valley that is at the end of the Alps that also offers a sort of a protection, and I think those days those regions might have a slight advantage for that, because the big problem, the new hop varieties are being developed now that are more resistant to the climate change, and it's cool, probably there is no other changes, but we are deeply attached to the old varieties. We strongly believe they are the most beautiful ones because of the subtlety that they showcase in beer and the balance they bring. And I don't want to see those disappearing, but we might see them disappearing someday. Actually, it seems ineluctable, sadly. But my hope is that in some regions they will be able to survive longer, maybe. When you choose hops, there are two things that for me showcase the biggest differences is the day of harvest. If you have one exact same field, same variety, and the composition of the soil is the exact same, but the field is big, and it needs 3 days to be harvested, you can detect very clear differences between day 1, day 2, and day 3. And then the next thing would be indeed the terroir of the field itself. Where is it located? What is the soil like? Is it drained when water falls? Is it keeping water a better way? What's the inclination of the soil, and how does it get the sun, etc., etc. From field to field, you can really tell differences for sure. So there is an obvious terroir effect. I'm not capable of explaining all the details of it, but each year I can witness it when I choose my hops for sure. And I always make sure to ask from which fields all the batches that I'm smelling are coming from. Also to gain knowledge. And to try to understand it. And it's something that we actually do with the farmer, because sometimes they know that the field is better under certain circumstances. They are not always sure why, but so it's a common learning process also that we have.
Yeah, some of the heavier soils have a capacity to hold more water to just keep it from trickling down, so you can suck up the water. So it's a heavier, less sandy soils. Sandy soils tend to be in a dry year to give hops of poorer quality or less aroma, less alphas. And it's the heavier soils, the almost clay-like soils that give the better harvest. Then certainly, as Yvan mentioned, the location. How is on a slope? Is there a forest next to it? It's always nice to have a forest a little bit above the hop yard, so at night you get the cool air flowing out of the forest into the hop yard. If it's sort of a downhill, gradual drop into the yard, then you get that cool air coming down. It helps to cool the hops down, and it's that cold air that we need at night. In September, usually in the end of August, September, those cold nights, it really help to develop the flavor that we're looking for.
It's very winemaker approach to hop growing, and I love looking at that kind of microclimate there.
It's very much like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was called the vine of the north, not for no reason before. Yeah.
Sure. Well, as we get to the finish here, let's just zoom out and ask a bigger, broader question. What's your biggest challenge in the next year or two in using European hops, and what are you most excited about in terms of the current state of your European hops? And maybe we'll start with you, Eric.
Current state, there's a lot of in Hu in the Hop Research Center there. There's some promising new varieties in the pipeline that are more heat and drought resistant. Those are all kind of later varieties as well, so it's going to sort of push the harvest window more towards the end of September, maybe even in October at some point. So I mean, there's no need to worry. There will always be hops. I still think that Central Europe is a perfect place to grow hops, and as Yvan mentioned, we might have to retract into certain remote valleys close to alpine lakes or mountains to get that right flavor. But there are varieties out there already that can withstand or that can accommodate climate change and give us what we need in the future. I, as Yvan, am a bit nervous for the classical noble aroma varieties and even some of the newer aroma varieties because, they just need too much water, and I'm just afraid that the coming years are going to be a bit of a problem. But I'm not afraid that we're not going to have hops.
Do you have a biggest fear and any excitement something that gives you hope for the future?
No, I have the same fears. Let's say, I hope that the new varieties will still showcase those wonderful noble flavors. That's my big hope. And at the personal level, I hope that I will be more and more better at trying to extract all those wonderful flavors from the hops and having them passing into my beers. But I still have some work to do.
Sure. But that's a good reminder there that the focus of hop breeding on the agronomic side of hop agriculture can't just focus on new aroma and flavors and creating the next Citra, that it also has to equally focus on building hops that are hardier, sturdier, that work for growers, that also work for brewers, and provide those same kind of flavor and aromas that for these beautiful classic beers that you all make, but do it in an agriculture that also fits the new reality that farmers are facing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is definitely the focus in Germany. It's all about how to accommodate climate change, or how to find hops that will withstand climate change. It's not so much about if it's got a nice fruity tropical aroma, then that's good. But
well, it can do all of these things. The breeding can approach the aroma and flavor, but the breeding also, needs to focus on.
The focus is certainly now it's climate change,
on the technical and the performance of these things. Cool. Well, I think that's a good place to bring it to a close. Choose G&D chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring. Take your operations to the next level with the experts at ProBrew. Old Orchard is the go-to source for fruit-forward ingredients for some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape. Omega Yeast Daybreak 5 gives you juicy modern hop flavors without the haze. Trust Indie Hop's unique varieties to modernize, brighten, and diversify your beer lineup. Berkeley yeast strains are designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency. And if you're a distiller or curious about it, check out the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. If you're not already a subscriber, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, become a subscriber to Craft Beer and Brewing. If you're overseas, we offer digital subscriptions that'll get right to you right away. And of course, everyone who's a subscriber gets full access to our back archive of magazine issues and everything else. It's a treasure trove of brewing knowledge available to all the time to all subscribers. So go do that. Yvan, if people want to learn more about De La Senne and the beautiful Belgian hoppy beers that you make, as Joe would say, reminding one of the primary reminders that Belgian beers also embrace hops. Where do they find you?
You mean my beers?
Your beers,
okay.
Or the brewery itself?
Oh, okay, yeah. So we are located in almost downtown Brussels, actually. People don't really realize that we are on a site called Tour and Taxi. It's a historical late 19th century site. We're in a modern building, but on a broader site. And it's actually quite close to the center. On a straight line, we must be less than 2 miles away from the Grand Place, which is like the center of downtown.
An easy walk, an easy Uber or cab ride, and a very easy scooter ride over here. I've done it before.
Totally. And soon, hopefully, a new tram line. But of course, we are in Brussels, so it will probably take ages before this is built. But it's coming soon. The politicians say. So yeah, we are very easy to find. Yeah, and we have now a tap room with a restaurant, and we try to be welcoming people.
It's changed even in the 2 years since I was here last, and it's fun to see things continuing to move forward here at De La Senne. Eric, if people want to learn more about Schönramer, experience your beer, where do they find you?
The best place to go is to Southeast Bavaria, to Schönramer itself. We're just north of the city of Salzburg in Austria, so we're right on the border there. So it's kind of hard to get to by public transportation. I mean, you can get to within 6 kilometers by train, and otherwise taxis from Freilassing or from Traunstein or from Salzburg.
And of course, the beer available. Actually, there's some available even in the United States.
There's some available in the U.S. We have an importer in L.A. called Uplifter Spirits, Mark Gerlach.
Mark Gerlach.
And he brings it over across the pond. And I think it's primarily available in LA, San Francisco, and Las Vegas. Maybe a few other places.
Sure. And De La Senne beers are also available in numerous places throughout the United States.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yes.
And thankfully, we get our fill of Terrace Bulba, even on draft where I am in Colorado, and I get to make Joe jealous that I get to drink it all the time. And he's
Cool.
going to be packing his suitcase full of Terrace Bulba to take back with him to Thailand tomorrow as this trip comes to a close. Anyway, thank you all for joining me on this episode of the podcast. It is always a pleasure, not just to talk about brewing with you, but to also get drunk and have that experience, because as you've said, it's such an important thing to do together. As always, cheers.
Cheers.
Pleasure.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
Jimmy. Thank you and cheers.
Thank you.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.